Stop the presses! Schools are teaching the wrong thing when it comes to the diversity of life, and it takes a YouTuber to point out exactly what it is that's wrong about evolution.
School taught you that we came from apes. They said that this theory was so solidified in reality that it's practically a fact. They lied to you. Lock in with me and let me fix your brain.
Fix my brain, huh? Well, I guess that does need to happen since I said stop the presses. It's not 1942, skeptic. Though this guy thinks it's even earlier than that with his dated opinion on the origin of species. Hello, I'm the Skeptic, the British floating circle that watches people make extraordinary claims, and then I explain why I don't accept what they're saying, in the hope that some folks who also don't believe get some reassurance that they're not alone in their non-belief. He is Lucid, a channel with close to 1 million subscribers, and he makes thought-provoking content, though it's not thought-provoking when you just flat-out deny science and say that schools are wrong for teaching what is, in fact, demonstrable. Stick around, though, as we discover why someone with no background in biological science points out why someone else with no background in biological science says dumb things about biological science. If this isn't your first Skeptic video, hit the like, the subscribe and the bell to get more videos like this in your feed. And a super thanks to those that hit super thanks in some recent videos: Brandon Naramore, Kasumi Rose, Hamaj2, Kevin Berry and Turtle M. Lisa the Rainbow Giraffe bestows leaves upon you all. More hen. So, what is it that schools are getting so wrong about evolution?
Now, before all of the biology majors start flexing in the comments down below with their PhDs, classical music, and British accents, let me explain myself.
Wow, I feel personally attacked. Though the only PhD I have is a pretty huge... never mind.
I am not anti-evolution. I do believe that human beings actually have evolved. We have seen this, we can measure this, it's an undeniable fact, but it's on a much smaller scale, and more importantly, a scale that we can actually test. These can be measured within human populations that I'll explain later on in the video, but I do believe that humans actually have evolved.
So he does get it. All evolution is on a small scale. Just move that time scale and little changes can add up to big differences over thousands of generations. I'm a big dummy and even I get that.
Let's clear up the first of the biggest lies. With neo-Darwinism, the evidence revolves around the theory and not the other way around. The bias will become a lot more clear to you as you watch the rest of this video. School left this part out of the textbooks, but Darwin himself actually said, analogy would lead me one step farther, namely to believe that all animals and plants are descended from some one prototype. But analogy would be a deceitful guide. But you're taught in school that he said the exact opposite, aren't you? That Darwin himself believed that we all came from one single prototype, when in reality, in his books, he says that he doesn't believe that. That's because school taught you neo-Darwinism, not Darwinian evolution. The differences are vast.
Can I just say, because I feel like this is where it's going, that pointing to a book from the 1800s where a man who noticed something and started to conclude that actually life is all connected, and then pointing out that this has holes in, doesn't disprove evolution. There have been hundreds of thousands of people that have continued the work that Darwin had the balls to introduce, and now the holes are being filled. The best thing about Darwin is that he started it off, but sure, he didn't have the answers science has now.
The neo-Darwinist leading theory of how they assume life started on Earth was by something called abiogenesis.
Air quotes doesn't discredit something, FYI.
To put simply, a pond of amino acids got heated from hydrothermal vents in the ocean floor that eventually evolved into all different types of life. Natural selection over time plus random DNA copying mistakes somehow equals all of life on Earth. It's a sad attempt at drawing a conclusion of the origin of life. In my opinion, it's unbelievable to even accept this theory.
Well, thankfully, it's just your opinion. I guess you have another way that it all happened. Or are you just going to say, nuh-uh?
Even if this was possible, it doesn't go into the maintenance and subsequent reproduction of the organism that was created. Furthermore, prerequisites to this theory such as spontaneous generation, which is basically saying that something can come from nothing.
The word created gets used too much, as it gives a false understanding of what actually happens. And no one claims something came from nothing. There was stuff. Heat, chemicals, light. That stuff eventually becoming some kind of biological organism still isn't coming from nothing.
Or life can come from no life, which is obviously not true, was actually disproven in the 19th century by a French chemist named Louis Pasteur.
And I guess the equipment used sometime between 1822 and 1895 is far superior to the equipment used today. Thanks, Louis, for using a Bunsen burner and a glass jar to prove that life didn't just spontaneously appear.
And before him, it was thought that if you close a jar of milk and then bacteria grows inside the jar of milk, it was because the milk would produce this life spontaneously, and that the life would come out of nowhere, almost as if it was a magical creation. He came to the conclusion that there were already organisms alive inside, and the bacteria there we just couldn't see. So that's why it would grow, because it was always there.
Which would have been a great experiment if the Earth was covered in cow's milk back 4 billion years ago.
It didn't just come out of nowhere. Additionally, abiogenesis has never been recreated, and the closest scientists have come to recreating it is the creation of simple peptides using artificial conditions.
Well, they can hardly use the original conditions, can they? That was silly.
The peptides created were not capable of having a secondary structure, let alone a globular structure, whilst at the same time ignoring all the conditions required to keep that enzyme stable and prevent it from denaturing artificially. This is very likely to not ever have happened naturally.
Well, I guess we should come back to those experiments in a few million years to see if there are any changes then.
There are different stages of human evolution in the theory, the latest of which are Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and Homo sapien, respectively. The debate here is, do we have a common ancestor to these species? Are they our ancestors that we've evolved from? Or are they a subspecies? And if we didn't evolve from them, then why did they go extinct? Did we just wipe them out and smoke them all and outperform them to their extinction? The latest claim isn't too hard to believe, actually. If you look at the nature of our species, what would we do if somebody just claimed a brand new land, a brand new territory on the planet Earth? Immediate war would be waged to gain control of the resources and of the land. We don't shake their hand and, team up like we're playing a squad in Fortnite. We go in for the kill and take all the land that we could for our own monetary and beneficial gain. That's the nature of our species. Literally, every single country would wage war against this little small country that has no army, because what are they going to do? Stop us? We want the money and resources, so we'll do it anyways.
Usually done in the name of religion, right? Right? Oh, that was needless. I'm sorry.
That's how we're built. The oldest Homo sapien fossil on Earth is a skull found in Jebel Urhoud, Morocco. It was thought to initially be 40,000 years old, then it was recently reappraised in the year 2017 to actually be roughly 300,000 years old. Now this is crucial because it shakes up the entire theory of evolution by slowing down the timeline way further than is possible to hold the current theory. The difference between our skull currently and the 300,000-year-old skull is from Jebel Urhoud was that it had a double-arched eyebrow ridge, a larger and protruding nasal cavity, a broader face, and a smaller brain casing. If that's all that happened in 300,000 years, then how many years ago were we apes?
We're apes now, buddy. But the time question is important. How long ago were our ape-like ancestors alive? It seems like much longer than 300,000 years, maybe millions. Whoa, I bet his mind is blown.
Now, if the end of Homo erectus was set to end around 27 to 100,000 years ago, and this Jebel Urhoud Homo sapien, like us, was alive 300,000 years ago, then that must mean that Erectus and Sapien were alive together. However, the current theory claims that we went back further and further in stages.
No, that's your misunderstanding of how it was. Let's say, just for a second, that X's population grows and splinters into smaller groups who then move around to different areas and eventually don't interact with other splinters of the original group. Over time, changes like being taller are advantageous to new group A, but being less hairy is more advantageous to new group B. Over many generations, the traits that benefit get passed on until group A and group B look completely different. They're similar species, but not the same. That's not linear, that's branched.
That our species was once their species. Now this is problematic, because not only do we have fossil records showing us that Homo erectus and Homo sapien, like us, being alive at one point, but we also have Homo habilis and Homo erectus being alive and hunting within 1 kilometer of each other at the same exact time. For these to be alive at the same time and in the same geographical region shows us that they weren't ancestors of each other, they weren't going back in stages, and it'd be a lot more rational to assume that they were separate entities entirely. So it's not far-fetched to believe that one Homo class outperformed and wiped out the other from habilis to erectus to sapien.
Well, yeah, no It doesn't disprove evolution though, which is what I thought you were trying to do.
Another point of argument is that the Earth didn't exist infinitely, so we have a timeline that we have to work with. The Earth has been a viable place of life for the last 4.6 billion years, which might make sense to you. However, we've had many mass extinction events such as the Cretaceous-Paleogene event, reducing the timeline of evolution to about 66 million years only. So with that in mind, the timeline no longer adds up.
But the mass extinction events didn't wipe out all life on Earth. Some life hung on like a relative you can't get to leave your house after a party that went on far too long.
If we were still Homo sapiens for the last 300,000 years minimum, and have undergone limited evolution since, Then how many years ago did we evolve from a pound of amino acids again?
Billions. That's got to be hard for some people to get in their heads. Put it this way, 1 million seconds is just over 11 and a half days. 1 billion seconds is almost 32 years. Get your slowly evolved brain around that.
Doesn't make sense.
Maybe not to you.
These fossils are probably the first thing that come to mind when you think about human evolution. A lot of these models that we've used to visualize evolution are actually so weak in authenticity that one of them is a fully fledged human-like ape model with the legs and arms and feet and everything that's fully constructed from a single tooth of a pig, my boy.
Thank goodness it was over 100 years ago and science has come on so much since then. And modern science just improves and relearns until we have the best possible understanding of what's going on.
When Lucy was first discovered in the 1970s, people thought that she was the missing link between humans and apes. Now, experts usually agree that this was just a 3-foot-tall chimpanzee, not a human in the making. The reason that they thought so was because of their neo-Darwinian presuppositions. Remember when I mentioned earlier that the evidence fits around the theory and not the other way around? We didn't recover any feet or hand bones from Lucy, but it was assumed that she had human feet and human hands. This further proves my point that there is a definite bias here.
Or, you know, you can look at other fossils of the same species as Lucy and see that, hang on, they did have ape-like feet and hands. Lucy isn't the only fossil of Australopithecus afarensis. There are more than 300 of the fossils today. Lucy is just another branch on a very diverse ape species tree. He then goes on a tirade of hominids that he thinks may disprove evolution. It's just stories of folks trying things and then not coming to fruition, which is basically what science is. Trying to explain things, and sometimes the results you thought would come don't. That's not a gotcha. You can go and see the part skipped over in the link in the section below.
They never taught you this in school, but Darwin was a racist. He was also openly sexist, and if he was alive today, he would be cancelled on Twitter and his entire theory would have been rejected. The most shocking was when he wrote in his book, written in 1871, titled The Descent of Man, where he says, at some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace throughout the world the savage races.
That doesn't change the fact you can observe differences in species. That's like saying you shouldn't believe in a god because of some German guy who also believed was being a dick to millions of people. No, you shouldn't believe in a god because there's no evidence for one.
Darwin actually wrote private letters that were not made to be public, but they obviously are now, to his Christian friend, where he was explaining that he was having a hard time believing in the Christian faith. He had a hard time believing in theism in general, but he did know that a God had to have existed. There has to be a God that has made all of this.
So now we're moving away from silly arguments to really dumb arguments. I thought, not long ago, that you said you can't accept what Darwin says because he was racist and sexist. But now, suddenly, it's convenient that he believed that a god did all this. Well, I can tell you that everything is here because of the one true deity, the cosmic horned mammal, Lisa the rainbow giraffe, leaf be upon her. She pooped the first life soup into existence because of diarrhea, and then it all evolved from there. It's amazing how you can use that explanation for anything.
The design argument still astonished him, and he describes in his own writing that there is a impossibility of conceiving that this grand and wondrous universe with our conscious selves arose by chance. So Darwin still knew that there was no way this could have happened by accident. But Darwin does also say that he couldn't overlook the difficulty from the immense amount of suffering throughout the world. The guy did have a very, very hard life. His daughter died very young. He went through extreme hardships throughout his life, so I can see why he thinks this way. But at the same time, any person of religion will tell you, yeah, Darwin, that's the point. That's why we're here, to be tested. Life is not made to be fun and easy and happy all day long.
Hang on. Why are you accepting one thing that he says because it aligns with your belief, but discounting something else he says because it wasn't what you believe? Cherry picking much?
But then Darwin also goes on to say, and quote me, I'm telling you, this is exactly what he says, word for word, verbatim. Tell this to your teachers in school. Darwin also says, it seems to me absurd to doubt that a man may be an ardent theist and an evolutionist. I have never been an atheist in the sense of denying the existence of a God. He also writes this, as if it doesn't make any more sense to you, he also writes, I had no intention to write atheistically. Darwin is saying this. He had no intention of doing it, but people somehow still were misinterpreting his words and were warping it for their own atheistic agenda to make everybody feel like they couldn't believe in God, actually. The reason that he makes his stance very clear is because his work was actually, at the time, being used as a way to promote atheism, or to prove atheism, or at the very least to deny any form of theism in general.
But atheism and evolution aren't remotely related. One is the explanation of the diversity of species, the other is whether or not there's a floating wizard in the sky.
This was the hijacking of Darwinism. T.H. Huxley was an atheist that used the Darwinian evolution and linked it to atheism. He was debating people of religion, and this is what actually caused Darwin himself to start writing about his belief in God and called it absurd. I quote, he calls it absurd that you couldn't be a theist at the same time still accept his version of evolution. Coming soon was Julian Huxley, was actually the grandson of T.H. Huxley, who actually wanted people to become atheists. He had this want to make everybody around him an atheist. He said that for the modern man, the new religion is Darwinism. And look at today. He's exactly right. He wrote an entire book about this topic, and he argues that the same way that today nobody believes that the world is flat, in the future, nobody will believe that God exists.
I'm not completely against that, since it's still folks that believe in a made-up being that have a say in what folks should and shouldn't do. But I'm really not sure how pointing out people who don't believe in a God somehow means that evolution isn't real.
He was the man who turned Darwinism into a religion and made it directly oppose atheism when Darwin himself didn't say anything of that nature.
How exactly is Darwinism a religion?
Coming up next was Richard Dawkins. So Richard Dawkins was a firm atheist, an evolutionary biologist that wrote a book titled The God Delusion. You probably heard about it in the past.
Wait, was? As in, no longer is?
Where he uses Darwinian evolution as a source to disprove God. Later he says in an interview with Lawrence Cross that if people think to believe in evolution, you need to be an atheist, then all I need to do is convince them of evolution and make them all atheists. This guy wanted people. This guy wanted people to become an atheist. He had this need. The same way that those guys knock on your door, hi, can you please talk about the love of our Lord? This guy was the same exact thing as the door knockers, but for atheism. Honestly, he did a damn good job because nearly everybody I know in real life thinks that this is the case. People in real life that I know think that to believe in evolution, you have to be an atheist.
Well, no, you don't. But you don't need a God for evolution, so...
Now, naturalism starts to come into play. This ideology is scary. Now, the atheists that I've just mentioned would actually have to accept naturalism as their new age religion in accordance with their hijacked version of Darwinism, obviously. Naturalism is the idea that everything in the universe occurs only as a result of natural phenomena, of natural forces that exist within the universe that are totally measurable.
Not a religion, because it isn't appealing to a supernatural force that requires a lack of evidence to accept. Stop making crap up.
It sounds pretty coherent, but if you don't believe in anything outside the universe or there's no room for divinity, this might make perfect sense to you. But there's a few flaws in this school of thought, to say the least. The worst of is that you cannot believe in free will and believe in naturalism at the same exact time. They actually go against each other. Because if you believe that everything in the universe only occurs as a result of natural phenomena, then even the thoughts you're having, all the physical and empirical measurable processes happening inside of your brain, all the decisions that you make may be a result of neurons firing a certain way and chemicals being affected by the natural forces in the world, which free will doesn't even hold room for.
You mean all those naturally occurring processes you just listed? I'm not even sure what you're trying to suggest here. It makes zero sense, pal.
So if you're a naturalist, free will is contradictory to your belief, and if someone decides to do harm to somebody, it can't be their fault because this is a result of natural forces and natural phenomena. So you can't blame that person for doing the worst thing in the world. It's not their fault, it's the natural forces' fault, right?
Well, now it sounds as if you're giving natural forces some kind of sentient ability. It can all be explained naturally. That doesn't necessarily mean that the natural explanations are a cause.
Who are they? How can you blame them? Because all they are is just a clump of cells and neurons firing inside their brain. To be a naturalist, you have to believe that there is no you, there is no soul. Nothing makes you you besides the physical flesh and brain and sack of flesh that you're living in currently. This is all you are, basically. Just this physical thing that I'm looking at right now.
Some would call that straw man construction.
But if you believe in this, then if somebody steals something from you, for an example, it's not their fault because it's a result of their environment. It's a result of their poverty. That's what caused them to actually go and steal. So they can't be punished for it, and you have to completely neglect the fact that this person is actually guilty. If every single decision their brain makes is just a result of the natural and physical forces acting on it, then there is no self to hold accountable for any actions. This is pure delusion.
Yeah, I could absolutely say the same, and it wouldn't get us anywhere closer to proving that there's any other explanation for why there are many different species on this planet. I think this whole thing is less to do with school's biggest lie, and is more about education's biggest failure, that being that this guy doesn't understand what evolution is, or just exactly how long it takes for little changes to add up to massive differences. Did his lack of understanding and trying to justify why he thought all this sounded dumb convince you? Let me know in the section below. I'm going to skeptic this as yet more lack of getting it. A big thank you to this month's top level ticks on Patreon: Addy Rockart, the Enixes, Elizabeth, Jakari, Whiskey Tech Fred, and the absolute lunatic Travis, as well as all the $3 base ticks. You can become a supporter on Patreon too at patreon.com/theskeptic. The link is in the description, along with links to all my other socials. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. From me, the Skeptic, stay safe, keep thinking logically, and ask questions. Skepticism is the first step towards truth. See you next Saturday.